They say that the most important sense for humans is sight, followed closely by sound, and while that may not be true for all forms of media, it is demonstrably true for video games. Among games, it's pretty much a given that the most important thing in the game is what you see. However, there are definitely layers to a game's audio that either enhances a game or brings a new mechanic to the game altogether. For this video, we're going to be looking at some of the game enhancers, more specifically video game soundtracks. I want to go over some of my favorite game soundtracks and how they help with both the game's feel and the lasting effect. I definitely wouldn't go as far as to say that video game music is better than all forms of music in general, but I do have my favorites in my own right that have their own place in my life. So in my effort to prove to you guys what every man wants most in their life, which is the admiration of their music taste, here are some of my favorite video game soundtracks and songs that I love. For this type of video, I think the best way to do it is to separate it into time periods and single out the best examples of what I'm looking for. So with that said, the first time period would start around the 1970s with arcade games and span all the way to about the early 90s with the release of the Super Nintendo. For the sake of simplicity, we'll call this the 8-bit era. It's really hard to call any of this music rather than video game themes, and I think it's important to make that distinction. I guess under the definition of music, you can call the Super Mario Bros. Theme music, but I mean, come on, are we really gonna sit here and say that the 20-second loop from the original Donkey Kong game is just as musical as the soundtrack of the Donkey Kong Country series in 1994? Because if we are, then what are we even doing here? It just seems like we're lying to ourselves. However, I'm not gonna sit here and just act like these video games had nothing going for them when it comes to sound. I think the single greatest contributor that they had over time was how recognizable a game was just by hearing the theme. Everybody knows Mario when they hear it, everybody knows Zelda when they hear it, everyone should know Mappy when they hear it because it was the best arcade game and I will fight for that. But if I had to choose a favorite soundtrack out of this era of games, I would probably go with Mega Man 2. Out of all of the arcade to Atari and NES games, I think that Mega Man 2, while not having the most recognizable music, has the best sounding music by far out of any game. The best song in the whole soundtrack for me has to be the Bubble Man theme. Would I listen to any of these themes over video game music in the future? Probably not, but I think it's important to set a starting point because the later years in video game music only get better from here. For the next generation of games, we have the 16-bit era. This was from around when the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis were released, from the late 80s to the mid to late 90s with the release of the N64 and the Sega Dreamcast. For this generation, I'd say the jump in musical styles between the 8-bit era and the 16-bit era is way more than the jump from the 16-bit to the modern day. This is where music in video games really became more important than what you just hear in the background. In some cases, it really set the tone of the game or created the setting. The most clear-cut example of this is in the music in what I think is the obvious best soundtracks of the 16-bit era, Donkey Kong Country and Donkey Kong Country 2. I don't even think that I can say anything original in this segment that hasn't been said, but there's a reason why these soundtracks are so highly regarded. Even to this day, if you ever feel sad or nostalgic, listen to Stickerbrush Symphony, that's all I'm gonna say. But there are so many different soundtracks here that I can remember better than the games in some cases. Chrono Trigger, Earthbound, Castlevania 4, a lot of the most memorable songs in video games come from the 16-bit era. However, I'd say the biggest difference between the 16-bit era and the era of modern games is that for the most part the music in the 16-bit era was still made with sounds that you can find on a computer. Maybe not sounds that originated from the computer, but it feels like there's more of an artificial element to every song. Like, even as somebody who loves the soundtrack of Donkey Kong Country, I can still hear that the sounds are strung together more artificially than in standalone music. And as a firm enjoyer of standalone music, I can confidently say that even though I love the sounds that came from the era of 16-bit games, I would be lying to you if I said it was the best time of music in video games. And now we have come to the modern era of video games, and right off the bat I just want to disqualify a couple of game categories. The first one should seem obvious, but all sports games are automatically disqualified. The reason is that all of their soundtracks are simply not really video game music. Don't get me wrong, I'd rather listen to the soundtrack of MLB The Show than pretty much any other video game soundtrack, but that's because the songs in the game are not MLB songs, they're just music that gets put in the game. It normally wouldn't be an issue, but these songs blow game soundtracks out of the water when it comes to being something that you can listen to. I mean, there are songs that can always attribute to games, like Love Me Again by John Newman being a FIFA song, or Up by Dune Rats on the show. But basically all the songs in sports games also qualify as standalone songs in their own right, so in my mind, I'm not going to be covering them. But if you need actual new music to listen to, the soundtracks of MLB The Show 22 and 23 are both fantastic, and they put me on to my favorite R&B singer, which is Ari Lennox. And the second game category that I'm disqualifying are rhythm games, you know, Guitar Hero, Rock Band, Beat Saber, those sort of games. For games like Beat Saber or Everhood, it should be self-explanatory, seeing as how if the songs weren't top tier, then the game wouldn't be as well known. And for Guitar Hero and Rock Band and games like that, it's the same reason as the sports games. So with those two out of the way, let's talk about modern games. So from the era of the N64 and the Dreamcast, all the way to consoles like PS5 and the Switch, this is where music went from a lot of computer noises put together to make a cohesive soundtrack to being played and recorded on an actual physical instrument with clear melodies instead of a memorable string of notes. And I think that the most prominent example of this, and one that everybody remembers, is the theme of Halo. You know, it opens up with that instantly recognizable Gregorian chant. Followed by that section of deep tribal drums and percussion. And it all culminates in the low string segment at the end. It feels like an actual orchestra coming together in your game instead of just a bunch of people throwing together some code in a video game. And I have to say that this song does a great job in inspiring you to keep fighting in the game that you're playing. The whole soundtrack eggs you on to the next level and does a masterful job of setting the tone and the pace of the whole game. And I think that that's what really separates the music from the modern day from what came before it, in that it sets the tone of the game. It's not really in the background anymore, and it's not easily ignored. But this is my video, so instead of talking about the soundtrack of Halo, I want to talk about two of my favorite soundtracks in video games, and surprise, surprise, they both happen to be modern games. The first is the soundtrack of the Super Mario Galaxy games. Super Mario Galaxy is my favorite game franchise, period. I know I said it was Mortal Kombat like 6 months ago, but I was really stupid and dumb then. This is my actual favorite game franchise. I've beaten both Galaxy and Galaxy 2 with 100% completion, including all green and bonus stars multiple times over, so I believe that I can say I know the games in and out. And something that I realized when I was growing up was that a big part of why I liked those games so much was their soundtrack. The Super Mario Galaxy games do the best job out of any video game period of setting the tone of every single level and event of the game, and the music also happens to be extremely enjoyable to listen to by itself as well. You can pick any level from either Super Mario Galaxy game, and you can't tell me that the music that you hear in the level doesn't feel like it belongs with what you're playing. There are even times in shows and movies where I've thought that something in a scene would be better with Mario Galaxy music in it. Could you imagine a scene in a movie where they're dancing, but instead of some random Mozart song, it's to the Observatory or Space Junk Galaxy? The songs are just so majestic and well put together, and they really speak to your heart when you're playing the game. And that brings me to the other series of games that I think has the best soundtrack in modern video games, and it's completely different than the Mario Galaxy soundtrack. And those games are Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, even though I think that they did Mick Gordon dirty in Doom Eternal. In case you didn't know, the whole point of Doom is to fly through high-octane levels and blow away everything that stands in your path. And there's nobody that makes a better soundtrack to a game like Doom than Mick Gordon did in Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal. These songs are just so aggressive and jarring and well put together that they serve as demonic war cries for you to wreak as much havoc as you can. And when I hear these songs, they get me so hyped up that I just want to kill somebody. Wait, hold on, that's not what I meant. Let me walk that back for any future employers that see this video. This statement did not hold any actual weight behind it. I just thought it would be a funny line in the script. What do I say? When I hear these songs, I just want to go hard. I'll say that. I want to go hard. And now I've covered my two favorite soundtracks, and I want to use the rest of this time to just talk about the main problem that I have with the music industry and video games today. I think that there's a pandemic sweeping through video game music, and that the modern day video games fall into trends of music that pretty much all sound the same. Take, for example, Call of Duty, because I have been playing a lot of Black Ops 3 Zombies recently. You can't go to any Call of Duty campaign or multiplayer song and tell me that you haven't heard that same song in every other generic shooter game. I don't even have to explain to you how the music goes, because I know that you can picture it in your head, and you're probably thinking of that same music that I'm thinking of. And this same complaint goes for games that are Souls-like games with those huge, sprawling, Lord of the Rings style musical numbers. The only thing about those games is that I feel like they kind of get a pass over a game like Call of Duty because they're reflecting the environment that the game is based around. But I think it wouldn't break the feeling of the game at all if they added in a little bit of guitar for extra flair once in a while. What I'm trying to say here is that the modern era of music is not perfect, standalone or video game, but games like Super Mario Galaxy and Doom, even other games like Undertale or Ori or Minecraft, just show how far being creative in the space of your ears can really affect the game. All in all, what I'm trying to say with this video is that music makes a huge impact on the quality of a game. Even as someone who has virtually zero education in music theory and only knows how to play the recorder from 4th grade, now as a grown-up I think that I value a game's music more than graphics at this point. I think the most important thing that you should take away from this video is that music taste is entirely subjective. Just because I have a problem with how whatever Call of Duty game they're on now is musically composed, if you like a certain set of music, then more power to you. I mean, hell, man, there are standalone genres of music that I can't stand, but I'm not gonna hate on you for liking it because I'm not you, so I wouldn't know what you like, even if the music genre you like is terrible. Like Stadium Country.
Even at my lowest. Yeah. You're so fucking retarded.